Okay, so so in 1975, maybe end of 74, towards the beginning of 75, Karen sent me this paper by one of Jerry's students. Karen and Jerry were in quite a lot of correspondence. And I said, I think I can do better than... There was this piece of theory there, and I said, I think I can do better.
Vector space?
Well, it was sort of within the framework of the vector space model, but it was about, it was a sort of relevance feedback thing. So the idea of relevance feedback had been invented by Rocchio in Jerry Salton's department in about 66, something like that. Invented. He was certainly the first person to write about the idea systematically. But this was this was another of Jerry's students sort of formulating a theory of how to do relevance feedback, I thought it could be done better. There were a couple of people in the UK, both in the UK, I think, whose work I was sort of aware of, which was sort of a little bit similar. One of them working with Medlars, actually, or Medline, maybe it was Medline by then, with how you improve queries, profiles for Medline. And the other one working with, I think, the Chemical Information Service, one of these big scientific abstract databases. Again, how you improve queries. So if you're running a query regularly, and you see how it's working, how do you then improve it? And so with those ideas and this paper of Jerry Salton's student, I thought we could do something new and good. And I put together this idea about term weighting, which I sent to Karen. And after quite a long time, because she, as I said, she didn't really regard herself as a programmer. She ran programs, but she wasn't an expert programmer. But and she ran evaluation. She ran ideas for systems against the Cranfield data. So she tried out my ideas, and I got this letter from her, which I still have, saying doesn't work at all. It's hopeless. And I've also got the letter 2 days later, which said there's a bug in my program. It actually works very well indeed. And that was the basis for the 1976 paper with Karen, which was what got me into probabilistic modelling and relevance weighting and all that. So that was published in '76 in JSIST, or JSIS. I think it was. No, it didn't have the T. I was just trying to remember. It had changed from American documentation, I think.
But it was 68 that they changed the name.
From American documentation. Oh, well, in that case, it was still American documentation in 66. Sorry, 68. Sorry, 76. Yeah. Yes, sorry. Okay, yeah. So it was JSIS, but not JSIS. Yes. So we sent this. Karen and I in this. I mentioned this research colloquium that we organised at University College. Karen and I spent quite a lot of time during that colloquium discussing this paper, because she'd already got good results, but we wanted to sort of firm it up a bit. So we wrote the paper at the end of '75, submitted it to JSIS, got quite a negative review back by Jerry Salton.
And you know that?
Yes, I know that. That's a sort of, that's an interesting change. I don't know. I can't now remember whether it was officially blind. It probably was officially blind, but blind reviewing, not double blind like Sagayara is.
Single-blinded.
It's still single blind. Okay, but it probably was, but almost certainly because Karen's name was on it, on the paper. And Jerry and Karen knew each other very well. It became very rapidly a sort of discussion between Jerry and Karen about the paper.
Okay.
Jerry did not like it, really didn't. there was a. No, I'll tell you that later. So Jerry had a lot of objections to it, and there was a bit of toing and froing, and eventually he was reluctantly persuaded to let it be published, and it was published. It's both mine and Karen's most highly cited paper by quite a long way, I think, which is nice. But anyway, that's 76. In September 76, that is after it had been published, I made my first visit to the States, did a sort of tour of various places in the States, giving seminars, with part of it with Nick Belkin, actually. But the latter part, I was no longer with Nick. I did a seminar at Cornell in Jerry's seminar group, and the interesting thing was I had no difficulty persuading his students that it was a good thing, that what I was doing was worth doing. Still had difficulty with Jerry. He really didn't like it at all, but his students picked it up very, very easily and sort of were happy with it. So that was quite interesting. So that's 76.
All this time you were.
I was still on my Royal Society Scientific Information Research Fellowship at University College.
At University College, and you haven't gotten your PhD.
No, I got my PhD in.
That was 76. So around the same time.
End of 75, beginning of 76. That's right. So I did have my PhD at that point. Yes.
There was not was not too much a milestone because of the project actually.
Exactly. By the time I got my PhD, I was well into this project with Karen. The project appears in my PhD thesis as a sort of afterthought. I mean, most of my PhD thesis was still about evaluation,
right?
And it sort of morphed a little bit into this probabilistic model, which sort of fitted with some of my ideas about evaluation as well. But no, by the time I'd finished my PhD, I was well into doing other things, so I didn't worry about it that much. So it wasn't a big milestone there. And after quite a long time, because she, as I said, she didn't really regard herself as a programmer. She ran programs, but she wasn't an expert programmer. But and she ran evaluation. She ran ideas for systems against the Cranfield data. So she tried out my ideas, and I got this letter from her, which I still have, saying doesn't work at all. It's hopeless. I've also got the letter 2 days later, which said there's a bug in my program. It actually works very well indeed, and that was the basis for the 1976 paper with Karen, which was what got me into probabilistic modelling and relevance weighting and all that. So that was published in 76 in JSIST, or JSIS. I think it was. No, it didn't have the T. I was just trying to remember. It had changed from American documentation, I think.
Right. It was 68 that they changed the name.
From American documentation.
From American documentation.
Oh, well, in that case, it was still American documentation in 66. Sorry, 68. Sorry, 76. Yes, yes. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So it was JSIS, but not JSIS. Yes. So we sent this. Karen and I in this. I mentioned this research colloquium that we organised at University College. Karen and I spent quite a lot of time during that colloquium discussing this paper, because she'd already got good results, but we wanted to sort of firm it up a bit. So we wrote the paper at the end of 75, submitted it to JSIS, got quite a negative review back by Jerry Sorton.
And you know that?
Yes, I know that. That's an interesting change. I don't know. I can't now remember whether it was officially blind. It probably was officially blind, but blind reviewing, not double blind like
Now
Seguiara's.
it's single-blinded.
It's still single blind. Okay, but it probably was, but almost certainly because Karen's name was on it, on the paper, and Jerry and Karen knew each other very well. It became very rapidly a sort of discussion between Jerry and Karen about the paper.
Okay.
Jerry did not like it, really didn't. There was a no, I'll tell you that later. So Jerry had a lot of objections to it, and there was a bit of toing and froing, and eventually he was reluctantly persuaded to let it be published, and it was published. It's both mine and Karen's most highly cited paper by quite a long way, I think, which is nice. But anyway, that's 76. In September 76, that is after it had been published, I made my first visit to the States, did a sort of tour of various places in the States, giving seminars, with part of it with Nick Belkin, actually. But the latter part, I was no longer with Nick. I did a seminar at Cornell in Jerry's seminar group, and the interesting thing was I had no difficulty persuading his students that it was a good thing, that what I was doing was worth doing. Still had difficulty with Jerry. He really didn't like it at all, but his students picked it up very, very easily and sort of were happy with it. So that was quite interesting. Yeah. So that's 76.
All this time you were.
I was still on my Royal Society Scientific Information Research Fellowship at University College.
At University College, and you haven't gotten your PhD.
No, I got my PhD in
that was 76. So around the same time.
end of 75, beginning of 76. That's right. So I did have my PhD at that point. Yes.
There was not too much a milestone because the project actually is
exactly. By the time I got my PhD, I was well into this project with Karen. The project appears in my PhD thesis as a sort of afterthought. I mean, most of my PhD thesis was still about evaluation,
right?
And it sort of morphed a little bit into this probabilistic model, which sort of fitted with some of my ideas about evaluation as well. But no, by the time I'd finished my PhD, I was well into doing other things, so I didn't worry about it that much. So it wasn't a big milestone. No. There's something I've missed out, which I must tell you about.
Okay. This is still on.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So, one of the features of the information retrieval scene in UK, I should say that UK actually was one of the major centres for information retrieval. There was some in the States, quite a lot in the UK, some in France, although that petered out after a while, but very little anywhere else in the world at all.
Okay.
But anyway, the information retrieval scene in the UK had the Cranfield project was going on. That was in the UK. And Cleverdon, who ran the Cranfield project, was regarded as a sort of world authority on this kind of thing. So he got involved in a Medlar's evaluation in 67 or so over in the States as advisor to that. But anyway, he was a librarian at Cranfield, what is now Institute or something, I can't remember, but it was then the Cranfield College of Aeronautics.
Okay.
So it's a very specialist college, and so he had this very specialist collection, and that's what he used for the Cranfield experiment. But he was quite a forceful character. He had very strong ideas of his own, of various kinds, on various things. And Jason Faraday, who was the leader of the city course, was a very strong-minded character, very strong ideas of his own, and for some reason, Faraday and Cleverden did not get on at all, not at all. They almost hated each other. I mean, they really. I don't think it's quite hate, but professionally they regarded each regarded what the other was doing as completely bad and hopeless, and they public meetings they'd get up and say so. I mean, if one of them was giving a talk, the other would be sitting in the audience just itching to jump up and tell him why he was wrong. There's quite a lot of this. I became aware of this a little bit when I was doing my a master's student, being a master's student and doing my dissertation. And of course, my dissertation was on metrics for evaluation, on which Cleverden had very strong views. So I did this dissertation, and then published 2 papers at the beginning of '69 in Journal of Documentation, based on this dissertation. So at the time, in '69, I was working at ASLIB, but I had been a City University student, a student of Jason Faraday's, and this dissertation came out of that.
Okay.
And Cyril Cleverden got this copy of Journal of Documentation, which you always read thoroughly as soon as it was published in January '69, and immediately got on the phone to the director of ASLIB. Remember, ASLIB published Journal of Documentation, and I was working there. Got on to the director of ASLIB, threatening to sue him for libel for what I said about Cranfield and about him. It was a sort of total emotional reaction. I mean, it didn't bear much relation to what I'd actually said, but it was a complete overreaction. So the then director of ASLIB sort of calmed him down a bit, and eventually, as a result of that, in the second part of the dissertation, the second paper, which was published in March. No, it must have been April '69. January, February, March, April. Yeah, it must have been April '69. No, sorry, I got it wrong. They were public. It was quarterly. It was March. The first one was in March. So the second one was in June. So anyway, I had. There are some footnotes. If you look at the June one, there are some footnotes on the first page of some corrections to the first part. Okay. And those were entirely because Cyril Cleverden got so upset about this. So this relationship, the fact that I was a student of Faraday's, sort of charred me with the same brush, which was occasionally a bit awkward. Cyril Cleverden ran these conferences, which were sort of prefigure the SIG-IR conferences actually. So he ran 2 or 3 of them, and I would go to them. I wasn't around for the first, but I went to the second and third, I think. I had this sort of slightly uneasy relationship with Cleverden, who was running them. So I'll tell you the sequel to that later on. Okay, there's a sequel.
I have to remember that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try and remember too.
Okay.
So where are we?
So we were at a point where you published the most highly cited paper with Karen, and then you got a PhD, basically from University College. So we were there, and what happens next? So the paper was very well received.
Yes, it was.
But Jerry Sullivan didn't like it.
Sorry?
But Jerry Sullivan didn't like it. It went up anyway.
It went up anyway. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then you joined City.
That's right. Yes. So at the end of my fellowship, which was '78, I joined City as a lecturer. So Nick Belkin was still there. The department was run by a man called Bob Bottle. Okay. Who, not an information retrieval person.
There was a natural development in your career.
Yeah, that was an entirely natural development. Yes, it was. I might have stayed. One thing I didn't mention: on the same lines that we were discussing library science and information science and computer science. The department at University College that I was in was actually a traditional library science department.
Okay, so I saw the name as Library Archive.
Yeah, it was called School of Library Archive and Information Studies. Okay. It had a mainstream. Its mainstream was traditional librarianship, people going into national or public libraries. But it had a very strong archives component. It's still there. Right. It had a rather small information studies component, which consisted of Bertie Brooks and no one else.
Okay.
So Bertie Brooks and a number of sort of masters and PhD students of his, chiefly.
He was a mathematician, statistician.
He was a statistician, yes. Just as a side remark, he got into information. He got into that environment because he had been in the engineering department, in electrical engineering, I think, in University College. But he got involved in a lot of work on teaching technical writing to engineers. Okay. Technical writing and other related subjects like search, information retrieval to engineers. And because that he sort of got on to that, that had sort of replaced his main sort of statistical background. Although he brought some of that work into information retrieval as well, but he transferred from the engineering department to the library school because that was the main focus of his work.
I see.
So he subsequently published some things. So either side of when I was involved with him, he published some things on bibliometrics. That was his main application of his statistical stuff. He also published one or two things in information retrieval. Right. But he had me and Nick Belkin as students and a number of other sort of master's students doing a variety of things. So I was there rather than in any computer science department, and that was mainly a traditional library school. I might have continued there. Actually, Bertie, more or less the time I finished my fellowship, Bertie Brooks retired, and there was a possibility that I would sort of take over his role there, which didn't work out. The next most obvious place for me to go was City. So and they were quite happy to have me, so I went back to City. So yeah, that was natural enough. And I stayed at City for 20 years.
That's quite a long time, but you became the head there.
I eventually became head there, yes. Yes. So Bob Bottle retired. There was actually a rather slightly unpleasant period when the department, it was actually called, not a department, it was called the Centre for Information Science when I joined it, when I did the MSc and when I joined it. And one of many reorganisations of City University, it was decided that it should have the status of department. When Bob Bottle was originally appointed, he was appointed director of the centre on a sort of permanent position, as a permanent position.
So it didn't have a library background. It was from the very beginning. It was Centre for Information Science.
Yeah, it was sort of So a bit more history. Until a number of years ago, the professional sort of library information field in the UK consisted of the Library Association, which is was then very large organisation representing mainly public, academic, national libraries, with a small but not very active special libraries group. Okay, people like Jason Faraday, a whole group of them, decided that the Library Association wasn't for them. It wasn't representing their interests well enough. So they formed a new institute in '58, I think, or something like that, called the Institute of Information Scientists, which was sort of for that kind of person, and because they wanted to distinguish themselves from libraries. Although many of them worked in technical libraries, they wanted their profession to be regarded as something different from librarianship. So they adopted this term, information scientist, initially, and regarded themselves as different from librarians, and there was sort of a bit of a rivalry there. So City University Centre for Information Science was the one place that the only academic department in the country which allied itself to that movement, because it was started by Faraday, who also started the institute. There were maybe at the time 15 more library schools around the UK. There are less now, I think. Which all pre-existed, and some of them, particularly Sheffield, sort of took on some of the ideas of specialist information work. Many of the others didn't. Many of the others remained traditional. But they all remained aligned to the Library Association rather than the institute. And then there was some mixing up a bit later, rather slowly. But the institute was always a rather small organisation, and eventually sort of was forced, because there wasn't enough support for it, to merge with the Library Association, which became the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, which is what it is now. Okay, in the UK. So that CILIP now includes the old Library Association and the institute. But it's still the case that it's dominated by the old Library Association, which was always much bigger. So those, and if you go to a meeting, I was at a retirement party for one of my old city colleagues last month, where several of these former institute members who were in CILIP, sort of bemoaning the fact that CILIP doesn't represent their interests very well. So there's still a certain amount of aggro about it.
Okay. All right. So how was the work going on when you first joined lecture in the city as a lecturer and then a reader, and then you became the head?
Yes.
So how was that trajectory?
That was. It was a bit of a shock having to teach. I mean, the research fellowship was wonderful. It just allowed me to do research. But I actually enjoyed teaching a lot. We had the city course. City department only ever taught postgraduate, that is, a master's, masters and PhD students, which meant that most of our courses, the full-time versions, were 1 year full-time, 1 calendar year, so going over the summer for the dissertation, which was actually a bit heavy, because we never got full academic holidays because we were always supervising 6 or 8 or 10 master students over the summer for their thesis. Yes, but it was good. I mean, I enjoyed that, but what I did. Eventually, first of all, Nick and I mainly decided that we ought to get a computer in the department. Okay, I mean there was a sort of university computing service, but we thought we ought to have one in the department. This was pre-PC, so getting a computer was a major undertaking, rather. But we decided we ought to have one. We got a small a mini computer, it would have been called at the time, in 1980, 79, maybe 80, probably 80, yes. Running Unix, and started doing a number of projects. So at the time, there were one of the main information retrieval activities at the time. By then, was these big services like Dialog. So Dialog has tapes from 50 abstract services and a search system, a Boolean search system.
In certain ways.
Yeah, that's right. So a Boolean search system, which required quite a lot of knowledge, understanding, training, skill to do searches. And in fact, that became one of the main things that we taught our students, because our students would become search intermediaries, and search intermediaries were necessary then. So we did quite a lot of training students on online searching, and right at the beginning we had one terminal and a very expensive dial-ups to California kind of arrangement. That gradually changed over a number of years, and getting our computer helped a bit in that, and we had to connect our computer to the internet. Didn't exist, but there was a UK system called Janet, which was the Joint Academic Network, which was, as far as the UK is concerned, the predecessor of the internet. And we got hooked up to that in a rather underhand way, which universities and the university computer science departments or computing services, sort of many of them, not all of them, many of them got connected up quite quickly, but sort of through official channels. But we didn't have that for our department. We didn't have that. And actually, I think what happened was, that's right, in the early days of Janet, you could only get connected to Janet if you were receiving funding from one of the research councils, one of the government research councils. Okay. So it was part of that process, and we were never in the running for that kind of funding because we didn't do that kind of project. But we managed to persuade someone to give us a sort of bootleg line into Janet, which caused some problems later. But we did have one anyway, and I started thinking about doing front-end experiments, which means we'd have a local program, which would to which the user would talk, which would formulate searches for a dialogue or whatever it was, data stuff, and thinking about doing that using the Robertson Spark Jones relevance weighting. So constructing a query as a set of terms and weights, and then generating appropriate Boolean combinations, getting results back and putting them in order, which is a little tricky, but it's possible. And we were sort of doing that in very early 80s, 81. So I got some money from British Library, from I've forgotten whether it was British Library then, but anyway, there was some source of funds for information retrieval research, not very big, but there was some. I got some money from that source to run a project, employed a programmer, and then did some user studies where we provided services through this front-end system to medics searching on Medline, and still with intermediaries actually, but we were sort of trying to evaluate what we could do with this system that would make the search process simpler, and that was in early 80s. We did that project, and that was interesting. Got sort of reasonable results, not wonderful. I think we probably reported that project in 84, 85, something like that. 86 maybe. around the same time, there was quite a lot. There was beginning to be quite a lot of interest in online catalogues, library catalogues. So OPACs, online public access catalogues. So this was not seen by the librarians as an information retrieval task. It was more seen as a providing access to what was the card catalogue. Since what librarians were used to, the kind of task for which librarians were used to using the card catalogue was identifying a known item. Okay, so
there's three sets of cards and author and title.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So in the sort of early to mid 80s, people were just libraries, big libraries, were just beginning to offer online access to the catalogues in a rather simple-minded way. Stephen Walker and another group, small group not at City, at what was then called the Polytechnic of Central London, so also in London, we're designing an online catalogue system. And Steve picked up on Robertson Spark Jones waiting and decided it would be a good thing to try and implement something like that in the online catalogue. Because people were searching, when people started searching, they would search for subjects as well as for known items. Right. So this system that Steve designed is called Okapi, originally intended just as an online public access catalogue. And it had, which was not totally unique, but quite novel at the time, it had this text box in which you could type anything. Okay, I think, I'm almost sure it was the first system in the UK to do that. I believe there was another system in the States that did that earlier. I'm not sure. I actually don't know about this. Provide the user with a text box in which they could type anything. Maybe another front-end system, I don't know. There were a number of people working in that kind of area. But anyway, Steve did that, implemented it in about 84. 83 maybe, I don't know. On this Okapi system at Polytechnic of Central London. And that project ran for 2 or 3 years and was an interesting project.